sold it for $700, so what does that mean? What's the profit? That would be really nice, but that's not the real profit. Why is that? There was an expense, right? What was the expense? Well, we had to drive and get it, okay? So we had to put gas in our car, okay? So that was nominal, right? Had to get a spark plug, okay? Minimal things, but if you're not careful, you can say, okay, before I count up the profit, I have to consider what was the revenue and what was the expense, okay? That is, I know you guys are thinking, okay, what does this have to do with the Bible, right? Keep following me, okay? Keep following me. Because the question is asked in verse number 36. What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? There's some words here. Gain the whole world. That is a big, big, big term. If he gains everything this world has to offer and has the world at his fingertips, yet he loses his own soul, what we call that man? The Bible gives a word for it, right? Fool. That man's a fool. He literally gave up what was the most valuable thing to gain something that was temporary. All right, let's keep on reading here, okay? Verse number 37 is a good question. Or, what shall a man give, notice this word, in exchange for his soul? Exchange for his soul. The greatest danger for a Christian is not necessarily failure. Sometimes failure is a good thing for us because when we fall, we know we messed up, right? Sometimes the greatest danger for a Christian is succeeding in things outside of God's will. Because there's a perceived success, because there's a gain, without considering what it cost or what the loss was. As we have these terminology, as we have these terms, let me just give you a couple thoughts and we're going to wrap it up tonight, okay? First of all, notice this. There is a loss that is negative. There is a loss that is negative. What can you lose that is negative? Well, there are things you can lose like your testimony. You could lose relationships. You could lose honesty. You could lose trust. You could lose decency. You could lose friendships. There are things that you can lose that are negative. Think about this. There's a way that you can lose money. There's a way that you can lose an investment. If you've ever had money in like stock market or if you ever have retirement, you know that the last couple years have been quite interesting. People that went to retire, I know a number of folks who retired right around 2020, 2021, and it was really difficult because their value went like this, right? Some of it came back up, some of it's still this. And here's what happened. They lost on the investment. It's always nice when you invest and gain, isn't it? But there's a way to lose. But the Bible's speaking here about things that are more important than earthly things. But let's be frank. There are earthly things we can lose. There is a loss that is negative. Think about your family. What would you say about someone who has all the nice stuff, and they have the wonderful job, and they have all the accolades, but they lost their relationship with their wife, or they've lost their relationship with their children? You'd say to them, nothing they could gain would make up for what they lost. I enjoy sports, and I enjoy reading about things. I enjoy business. I enjoy, like I said, I enjoy watching certain things, but I've heard so many testimonies, so many reports of people that talk about what they gained. I think about Tom Brady. Tom Brady is an iconic football player. But if you go read, just recently, Tom Brady did this thing called a roast. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened, but he literally made millions and millions of dollars, and people got paid lots and lots of money basically to make fun of Tom Brady in an open session for a certain amount of time. I didn't see the roast. I saw a couple clips, and it definitely would not be something you're going to go home and watch, right? But here's what happened. Afterwards, Tom Brady said, all the money I made from that was not worth it because it hurt my children. Because what they did was they mocked him, and they mocked his wife, and basically they were open for anything they want to say. And here's what happened. A man may have gained $4, $5, $6, $10 million, but what did he lose? What did he lose? And at the end of the day, you'd say Tom Brady didn't gain. He gained, he had no profit because he lost more than he gained, right? And you and I would say, we understand that, but if we're honest, there's times in life where we can get doing things and we lose we lose things that we're never going to get back. We can lose influence, and we can lose relationships, and we can lose friendship. There's a negative to it. Not only, though, is there a loss that is negative, let me just encourage you, but be frank. There is a loss that is positive. I'm going to give you this little caveat, but it's still very difficult. There's a loss that is not negative, it's a positive loss, but it's still very difficult. If you say, I have the wrong kind of friends, and you lose those friends, the loss of the friends is good, but to say it doesn't hurt would be incorrect. If you said, I had a job, and I lost the job, but it wasn't what was best for me. I was compromising my integrity. It was taking me from church. It pulled me from my family. The loss of the job will still hurt, although it's a positive loss. It was for the better. A job, the wrong kind of friends, popularity. Can I help you with something? Doing the right thing does not always turn out right when it comes to friends. I remember being told as a teenager, doing the right thing is sometimes hard. Sometimes when we do the right thing, it costs us relationships. Sometimes when we're willing to step out and do what other people won't do, it's the right thing. But to say to our kids or say to the younger generation, hey, doing the right thing is always a temporary benefit, there's sometimes a temporary loss. Tell the person who's in a relationship and gets saved and breaks up with that significant other because it's not the right thing. When they're home alone, it doesn't feel right. The hurt's there, but guess what happens? In the end, there's a profit. But the gain is not always realized because there's sometimes a greater loss initially. If you've lived for Christ for any length of time, you've experienced loss. Here's something. Do you realize going to church can be considered a loss? I've always in my entire life been thankful that my parents had me in church. Our family's been in church. But when people talk about having a weekend's not quite the same for a Christian as the weekend is for a lost person, is it? Because the weekend means Friday night to a lot of people. I sometimes frequent like shops or things, and people talk about Friday nights. They can't wait to go out. What are they going to do? Most of the time, the world goes out Friday nights, and a lot of times they're partying, having a good time, and they wake up Saturday, sleep in. They have a good time Saturday. Sunday they wake up. They're not usually normally going to church. And so Sunday they may be at the lake, or they may be at the store, they may be at the ball game. And you say, well, there's no loss of that. Well, if you think that way, that's true. But if you're a new Christian and you say, hey, you should be faithful to church, there's a loss. You're losing out on something because you're seeking something that's a profit. There's a loss that is positive, but it is difficult. Number two, there's a loss that is negative, there's a loss that is positive. Number three, there is a gain that is temporary. There is a gain that is temporary. There's a loss that's negative, there's a loss that's positive, there's a gain that is temporary. Let me explain. A person who says the most important thing to me is to be popular, they can temporarily become very popular and gain a whole lot. But, hear me well, they didn't profit, they just gained. I think about so many people, in my years in church you've seen it too, so many people who have said to me, I have a job offer. I'm moving to a new area. And a lot of times they have young children and they're doing it because they're trying to get ahead in life and there's nothing wrong providing for your family. But hear me. So often I said to people, what church are you going to? And they said, we haven't looked yet. And they're willing to get a job increase and move somewhere. And many times, because I'm friends with them on social media, they go somewhere and never get connected to a church. And here's what happened. They gained money, they gained the house, they gained the fortune, but they lost something so great that they cannot get back because the gain was only temporary. Temporary gain can be popularity. We all desire for people to like us. Some of us more than others. But everyone in here, no matter who you are, you cannot honestly say, I don't care what people think about me. If you say that, there's still some things you care about. Sometimes the desire to please people can be a wonderful gain, but really it's not a profit. Because you may be the popular person everybody likes. You may gain friends and popularity. Listen, you may gain this world's goods. You may do everything you possibly can and get ahead by this world's goods. It could be the job. It could be some kind of entertainment making people laugh. It could be pleasure. And the Bible says there is pleasure in sin for. See, what does that mean? There's a gain. The problem is there's not a profit. Why is that? Because if we're going to consider the profit, we have to think, what do we gain? What do we lose? There is a gain. There's a loss that is negative. There's a loss that is positive. There is a gain that is temporary. And finally, fourthly, would you notice this evening? There are some things that cannot be exchanged for. There are some things that cannot be exchanged for. Look with me in verse number 37. Or, what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? I was talking with one of our staff members here recently and talking about family, and this staff member has a family member who's near death and not sure if they're saved. And I explained to them situations with family members I have. We had privilege to go on to see family and a little vacation. Vacation's a hard word. You all know how it is. Sometimes you see family, you run. So it's a vacation, but a lot of time it's a trip as much. And one of the things I enjoyed doing was visiting my grandparents. And I saw my grandparents back in, we saw them in Thanksgiving or something, Christmas, sometime we saw them. And in the last 6-7 months, my grandparents' health has both deteriorated greatly. And seeing my grandfather, as far as how weak he is and as far as the way he looks, he definitely looks quite different. But the truth is, not about his looks or about anything like that. The thing that most concerns me is for his soul. And the reality is, all of us know people who were concerned for their soul. So in this text, we understand what Jesus is saying here about our soul, but can I give another angle to this that I think the text allows here? For us who are Christians, what are we willing to exchange that we will spend the rest of our life wishing we wouldn't have exchanged it for? What shall a man give in exchange for, let's ask this question, his testimony? Is there anything worth giving your testimony up? No. But let's be honest, all of us at times have been willing to give up our testimony in front of someone or our reputation in order to gain something, and we exchanged and we made a very, very poor decision. Our testimony. What about our marriage? What are we willing to exchange for the marriage God desires for us to have? What is it as far as time, or as far as interest, or as far as hobbies, or as far as sinful things, would a person exchange in order to have some moment of excitement or pleasure or some moment of feeling that they're doing something else, but they've exchanged something that was more important? They had a gain. They didn't realize the loss is greater than the gain. What are we willing to exchange our family for? I'm young, and our children are at home right now. I have spent so much time with people who have children who are out of the home, and I have taken so seriously the reality that so many people say, I wish I would have. And I guarantee you there are things I would say already I wish I would have. But one of the things we worked hard, and we're working hard to do, is try our best to have fewer regrets. And try our best to say we're not going to exchange other things for our family. We're not going to let other things take the place of what is very important to our family. How about a clean and a pure conscience? What are we willing to give up a clean and pure conscience for? What are we willing to make the exchange for something that is a gain, but it's actually a loss? Finally, what about the will of God for your life? Are you willing to take a loss now because there's a gain that is greater in the long run? Or are you willing to say, you know what, the will of God, I'm not concerned because I want my way. Jesus said, if any man will come after me, let him, what's the first thing he said? In other words, Lord, not my will, but Lord, your will. Tonight, I know we spent a lot of time talking about gain, loss, and profit. I hope you'll remember this thought because I think it's a powerful one. But let me conclude with this thought. How do we gain? How do we determine what is the true profit? Let me give this illustration. I'm finished. If you were to say to me, I am heading to Hagerstown, Maryland, never been there before, and I'd like to know what to do in Hagerstown. And you said, hey, Sam Hernandez, what should I do in Hagerstown, Maryland? Sam, you ever been to Hagerstown, Maryland? Sam could probably look online and get a couple ideas, right? Probably not be very helpful to you to suggest some good ideas, right? Pastor Kyle lived an hour and a half, 2 hours from Hagerstown. He'd be able to give you better advice because he lives closer, right? But wouldn't you say it would make sense to ask the guy who grew up there and whose family's there? Let me make this illustration clear, okay? If we want to know, Lord, where do I want to invest my life to gain? And I know there'll be losses, but to have the greatest profit, who do you think would be the one we should use as a compass? Where should we go to ask the Lord, Lord, help me to be able to invest my life so that when I look in my life, it goes back, I do not say, yeah, there was some great gains, but the loss was greater than I realized. I want to say this, there's going to be losses for all of us.